And welcome back, everybody, to episode 185 of Two Goalies, One Mike, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from. If you need a beer, make sure you make it a fatty beer and let them know we sent you over here from Two Goalies, One Mike. And as always, Buffalo Logo Apparel. When it comes to your shirts, your hats, your hoodies, they have everything you need from your bills to your Sabres apparel at Buffalo Logo. You can find them at Buffalo Logo Co. on Instagram and Twitter. Find Fatty Beer at Fatty Beer on Instagram and Twitter, fattybeer.com. I'm going to get right into it. We're going to bring in the guest of honor, one of your favorite writers, one of the more polarizing writers, our man, Mike Harrington. Mike, how are you? I think this is like probably your fourth or fifth time on with us. Always a pleasure, and a lot to talk about. And I've been instructed by you to make sure that you don't swear tonight.
Well, first of all, I just literally might have sworn about 20 seconds ago. I had a technical disaster here. So can you hear me all right? Everything good?
Oh, we hear you perfect.
Oh, great.
Right. The microphone actually dropped off the desk and split in half. So I had to quickly avert disaster and put that together. But thanks for having me on. Thanks for making sure the mic works. And I always like talking hockey. So let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, even like today's with the interview with Pete Goelli over at WBN, we can talk about that too. But I think that is like probably amongst obviously the Sabres season ending on tomorrow night on Fan Appreciation Night. That's kind of like been the hot topic around Buffalo. I know in our group chats we've been talking about it. I know you've been very vocal about it. I obviously on your side of things, I was kind of backed up by Pete this morning during that interview. Just your immediate thoughts. We'll get right into it about the initial news from Channel 2 about the lease agreement ending. You know, Pullman Carr saying they're walking away from their responsibility with the lease, and then Mark Scanlon saying, "Well, this is news to me. I've never been." You know, all just a lot of drama surrounding it, and you've been very vocal about it. Just your immediate thoughts on that.
You use the word drama.
Yeah.
All right. I can't say it any other way than this. Everybody relax. This is clickbait garbage. Okay. This was, and I don't like criticizing another media outlet. This was a television station looking for attention, not putting the whole story together, trying to create a little panic and a little drama among the fan base at the end of the hockey season. The bottom line here is the story's correct in that Pullman Carr's said he'd like to be out of the stadium and arena business for the county. The county would have liability for security, blah, blah, blah. They know the whole renovation thing is coming, okay? Pete Goelli told me last summer, there'll be a partnership here to do renovations. And the one, warning shot Pete Goelli told me that we put in the newspaper was that in most cities with two teams, you have two different owners. And the two owners would go to the politicians for money. The problem here in Buffalo is it's the same owner. Well, they don't expect the state of New York to turn them down when they ask for money for KeyBank Center just because it's the same guy. Okay, so you fast forward here. Oh, the lease is up. The lease is up. What's going to happen? The county wants out. Well, the city can't take it. The city's broke. What are they going to do with the team? There's so many provisions here just for them to keep talking about it, for them to extend the lease. Okay. And the idea, the team's going to move. How long did the National Hockey League try to keep the Arizona freaking Coyotes in Arizona with a bad arena downtown in Phoenix and with an arena that was very nice, that was way out in Glendale near nobody where anybody lived? They kept that franchise afloat for 20 years. You're going to let the Buffalo Sabres go somewhere? No. Really? And a franchise that Gary Bettman, let's not forget, owned the Buffalo Sabres.
Yep.
Okay. Essentially, Gary Bettman, that 2003 range after Rigas, owned the Buffalo Sabres. So I don't want to hear about, the Buffalo Sabres are going to go to Houston or they're going to. No, the NHL is going to go to Houston through expansion fees. So they can take that $1 billion they get and spread it around to all the teams. They're going to go to Atlanta again with expansion fees. The Buffalo Sabres aren't going anywhere. It's the biggest non-story. Our reporter on the city side called Poland Cars up, essentially saying, "Well, people are going crazy." Or Poland Cars was like, "What are you talking about?" Well, the whole Channel 2 story. It's just garbage. And to their credit, if I'm going to throw stones, I have to throw credit. Channel 2 did another story tonight. I don't know if you saw it. And they basically laid it all out there. No, the Sabres aren't moving. No, there's provisions in the lease. Now, it would have been nice if they had done that originally.
Yeah.
Okay. But they did the right thing tonight. They talked to Goelli, just like we did, just like WBN Radio did. It's not anything anybody should be worried about. It became this social media thing, and it was ridiculous. They're not going anywhere. They're not moving out of the building because the lease is expiring. These things are always taken care of. It's posturing on all sides. It's just who's going to pay. How much is the city paying? How much is the county paying? How much is Kathy Hochul paying? And how much is Terry Pagula paying? That's all it is.
Your thoughts, Connor?
Well, that's good news, I guess, because as bad as it's been, I don't think anybody wants the team to actually leave.
There's no chance. Zero. We should barely even, guys, I'm serious. We should barely be even having this conversation.
And I never, even after yesterday, I never thought it was like a real possibility. I thought that it would potentially be sold to Terry for cheap or something of the like. But hearing this perspective obviously makes, I think, us and everybody feel better about it. So it's a non-story. Speaking of Gwelly, something I saw you responded to on Twitter today from Ben Mathewson, pretty prominent member of Sabres Twitter, talking about him being the business guy on both sides of the NFL and the NHL. And he's doing a fine job, but it's kind of crazy to have one guy in charge of two different franchises, basically having an NFL guy learn the NHL and vice versa. And then you said, I've always felt Terry doesn't want a real NHL guy in there, giving him the mutuals on everything he's done wrong and is doing wrong. So he goes this route. I would like for you to speak to that a little bit from both a business perspective and also how that relates to Terry's stance, which you've said before on the show, and you're the main proponent on it, that he refuses to get a president of hockey operations in the building.
Well, first of all, I think Pete Goelli's been a fine choice, especially at this time in the history of the franchises. You really needed someone strong in there when you're building a football stadium. Right. Pete Goelli did not have a hockey background. His background's in the NFL and the NBA, but he's dived headfirst into the NHL and meeting people, learning about the league, and he finds it very interesting, some of the members of ownership and board of governors that are involved with hockey teams, because you guys know, you followed hockey a long time. There's some dynamic owners in the NHL now that didn't really exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. A lot more money involved. So it's really interesting to see that kind of development. I just think Terry Pagula loves hockey. Terry Pagula loves hockey more than he loves the NFL and football. The NFL and football makes him a lot of money and has him a lot closer to a championship too, just for the record. He loves hockey. He wants to be more involved in hockey. I don't think he wants to listen to outside people telling him the mistakes he's made in hockey. You know, one of the reasons Jason Botterill got fired, why did Terry Pagula say he fired him? He stopped listening to me. Terry Pagula wants his general manager to listen to him on a daily basis. Kevin Adams does. That's a negative a lot of the time. You're not going to have a veteran president of hockey operations running the Buffalo Sabres telling Terry Pagula all the mistakes they've made in building their team. The fact that they have to now spend to the cap. This whole argument, which was a little superfluous over the summer, they didn't spend to the cap. Well, they had some reasons. They're going to pay their guys. Well, they don't have to pay Devin Levi. They don't have to pay Jack Quinn now. Now they got to pay maybe J.J. Peterka. They got to pay maybe Ryan McLeod. They certainly got to pay Alex Tuck, but the cap's going way up in the next 3 years. So, most people would say spend to the cap here to try to win. Some of the things they do with season tickets, they're trying. The arena needs work, and any president of hockey would say, we got to do something. All these other cities have spent their $200 million in their arena. We're behind. Terry doesn't want to hear it. This organization, one problem, They don't want to hear it because they're building a football stadium. They're building the Taj Mahal of Orchard Park. And, excuse me, unfortunately, we're not going to see that $200 to $300 million renovation at KeyBank Center that I think we will see. We're not going to see it till after this football stadium's open. We're not even going to see discussion about it hardly, let alone actually see any work. So that's a problem. And I do think Terry likes his direct line to Kevin Adams and he wants it to work. But Kevin Adams has 1 year left on his deal. And he's lucky he's going to get that 1 year.
Yeah.
He shouldn't. It's Terry's team. Kevin's going to get the 1 year, but that's going to be it for Kevin. And Terry doesn't want to have to make another move because Kevin listens to him. The next GM, who better have experience because all Terry's done is hire first-time GMs, the next GM isn't going to want to listen to Terry Pagula. And they're going to bring in a president of hockey operations someday because Terry's going to have to say to himself, I've missed the playoffs 14 years in a row. I got to do something different, but that's why he does not. There are too many people in that organization right now. They don't argue.
Mm-hmm.
They never argue there. All these people in scouting, pro scouting, they sit around the table. Excuse me. They all. I apologize for that. They all argue. They talk among themselves, and Kevin thinks everything's fine. They don't argue.
And to the point you made earlier too, like about the Arizona Coyotes, like I wanted to follow up on that. Like they did all they could to keep the Coyotes in Arizona. And you even go back as far as Buffalo, like they literally essentially owned the team and waited until they had a buyer that intended on keeping the Sabres in Buffalo. So that was always my first impression when hearing that initial news about from Channel 2. It was like a week or two ago about the lease agreement running out in October. So I was honestly never really too worried. But again, it's a very polarizing talking point, and I'm just glad to see that Pete Welly put that to bed. To your point about Kevin Adams and spending the cap, this is like the make or break. Last year should have been the make or break year. This offseason is absolutely the make or break for him. Whether they decide to extend him after next year or not, you have to spend to the cap. I want to throw some names out at you. We already got some people asking in the chat. One of the things that we've talked about a lot in here, we haven't talked with you about it yet, is a guy like Mitch Marner, if he gets to market, really that unrealistic for the Sabres?
Yes.
You think so?
First of all, why would Mitch Marner want to come here?
Why would he want to leave Toronto?
Why would he might want to leave Toronto if they struggle in the playoffs. He might want to get out of the fishbowl.
Yeah.
Okay. But he's from Toronto, but he might want to get out of the fishbowl. Why would he come here?
Money. I think Buffalo.
Do you think the Sabres are going to pay Mitch Marner the most of any team out there? I mean, I suppose that's not a ridiculous thought.
Yeah,
but the problem is,
theoretically, we've discussed like they have the ability to, right?
They definitely have the ability to.
They do. I mean, they're going to have to pay Alex Tuck, but not 12, 13 million. Alex Tuck's going to cost them 7, 8. What do you do with Peterka? Maybe you get rid of him. I don't know. I don't see why Mitch Marner would come to Buffalo. Now, money's money, but I think there'll be other teams that'll give Mitch Marner money. I mean, isn't Kyle Dubas going to get involved with Mitch Marner this offseason?
You would think.
Aren't the Chicago Blackhawks going to get involved with Mitch Marner this offseason? Assuming he's not going back to Toronto, isn't that a team that's going to do it? I think it's very difficult for a player like that, who is now going into the playoffs for his 9th straight year, to sign with the Buffalo Sabres, who haven't played in the playoffs his entire career. That's a risk. Yeah. That's a risk. Is. So I'm not. And the other thing is, again, we're hearing all this talk. What do the Buffalo Sabres need this offseason?
They need a defensive partner for Owen Power.
Do they need Mitch Marner? Do the Buffalo Sabres not score enough goals right now?
No, they definitely
Mitch Marner's great. I'll take Mitch Marner, sure, but they don't need Mitch Marner. If they get Mitch Marner on this team, they still don't have enough ways to keep the puck out of their net.
I've been on the side of, I know I've talked to you about it in length, like go find a goaltender like a Jake Allen or a Thatcher Demko who makes only $250,000 more a year than UPL and is only signed for through next season, which it's a low risk, high reward type of situation, especially if he stays healthy and he's had 2 Vezina caliber seasons. I'm definitely, I would put defense and goaltending above a guy like Mitch Marner, but here's my thought is you have a guy like Tage Thompson who signed to, honestly, in my opinion, possibly the best deal in the NHL.
Could be.
Find me another 40-plus goal scorer who's making just over $7 million. You don't. It's almost like Nathan McKinnon's contract from a few years ago where he was extremely underpaid. And I blame Tage Thompson's agent for that. Like, why would you let him sign that deal and not let him sign a bridge deal and let him get the big payday earlier in his career? I want this team to take advantage of the fact that you have a potential 50 goal scorer on your team signed to as if he's like on an Alex, like, this isn't throwing shade at a guy like Alex Tuck, but like that's the money you would expect like an Alex Tuck or a JJ Peterka to be making, not a guy who's going to put up 100 points and, score 50 goals for you. I want them to take advantage of that, and if it means overpaying a superstar, maybe not Mitch Marner, but a player of that caliber, I'm all for it.
See, but keep this in mind, Duane. Keep this in mind. Going into last night's game against the Leafs, okay? Break the microphone. Going into last night's game against the Leafs, the Buffalo Sabres had scored 1 more goal than the Toronto Maple Leafs this entire season.
Yes.
Okay? Going into last night's game, the Buffalo Sabres had given up 53 more goals than the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's your difference. They have not kept the puck out of their net nearly enough this year. I can't worry about chasing Mitch Marner until I sign 3 more defensemen, okay, and until I make a decision on what I'm going to do about my goaltending, whether I'm going to go with Luukkonen and try to get a Jake Allen type in here with him, because I'm not going with Luukkonen and Levi next year as my pair because I have to make the playoffs next year. So maybe Levi gets traded or maybe Luukkonen gets traded. I don't know. But I'm going to make whatever decision I make with goaltending and bring in 3 defensemen. I've scored more goals than the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. I have a better goal differential than the Montreal Canadiens this season. I'm not close to the playoffs because I can't keep the puck out of my net. That's all Kevin Adams should be doing 24/7 is figuring out his defense and goaltending.
I agree with that.
In terms of a secondary problem with this team, because I would agree that was the main problem this season and with this current roster, the power play was still pretty abysmal. And obviously bringing in Seth Appert to run it compared to Matt Ellis didn't seem to work very well. What do you think will happen not only with the power play, but with Lindy's assistant coaches this offseason? I think that's been a big topic for people.
Yeah. The power play is weird. Power plays tend to be weird. You think of all over the years, the Pittsburgh Penguins have had terrible power plays with Crosby and Balkin and Letang and Erik Karlsson. They have superstars, Hall of Famers. Their power play, for whatever reason, has never been good. Sometimes that's the old basketball analogy. There's only one puck. There's only one ball. And sometimes in the NBA, it doesn't work. There's only one ball. I've covered college basketball teams. It didn't work. There was only one ball. The puck needs to move around more. The Sabres power play has been better lately. Going into last night's game, it was running at 33% over, I think, the previous 11 games. That's pretty good, 33%. I like Appert a lot. I'd bring Appert back and get rid of the rest of the assistant coaches next year. But I just have Appert, in a different spot. Somebody in the chat just said, not letting Ruff bring in his own assistants. Let's talk about that for 30 seconds. Let's get this point right. Not letting Ruff bring in his own assistants was malpractice. Okay, first of all, everyone blames Adams for that. Don't blame Adams for that. Assistant coaches on the staff had contracts. Terry Pagula wasn't paying people not to coach. That's Terry Pagula's fault. That's not Kevin Adams' fault. They're not paying anyone not to work anymore except Don Granato. So he wasn't going to let Kevin Adams or Lindy Ruff fire the whole coaching staff and pay them not to work. Okay, so let's get that straight. Now, Ruff wanted Appert. Ruff told me point blank in July he wanted Appert. He knew about Appert. He watched Appert when Utica was playing the Amerks in the playoffs. He wanted Appert because Appert knew all the players in the organization, including the NHL players, and knew all the prospects. Everybody says, oh, Lindy's come back to the Sabres. People, he'd been gone 11 years. He didn't know any of the players at all. He certainly didn't know any of the prospects or the draft choices. Appert did. Appert was running development camp. Okay, so Ruff wanted Appert. The other guys all had contracts. The defensemen went to Adams, Dahlin and company at the end of the season, said, don't get rid of Marty Wilford. They love Marty Wilford. The goalies are okay with Bales. Okay, they all had contracts. That's why the assistant coaches stayed.
Mhm.
You know, somebody's like, why was Mike Pekka allowed to leave? You know why? They didn't want him to leave. He was in Rochester. He went with Peter Laviolette because he was Peter Laviolette's captain.
Yeah.
And Peter Laviolette had a job for him in the NHL. He was the captain of the New York Islanders. So it's not like the Sabres let Pekka go. Pekka chose to leave because he went with Peter Laviolette. Now, I'd be on the phone as soon as Laviolette gets fired here by the Rangers. I'd be on the phone immediately if I'm Lindy Ruff to Pekka going, all right, come back and be associate coach of this team next season. But, you know, this whole narrative, there are narratives all the time about a season, you know, and I try to tell these stories and, you know, it's just constant.
Yeah.
The assistant coaches had contracts and Terry Pagula was not going to fire them and pay them not to work. That's why Ruff had the same assistants.
Definitely always felt like that was part of it. With Pekka, there was always speculation too with him that he didn't want to be the eye in the sky. He wanted to be on the bench, and that was going to be Matt Ellis's job. And it was that year. He was on the bench. And
Right.
now Matt Ellis is the eye in the sky.
Now he's the eye in the sky, right?
I assume that might have been part of it. He wants to be. He felt like he earned a spot on that bench, and he was given that opportunity in New York.
They're going to fire all the assistant coaches. I don't have a great intel on this yet, but it's obvious. They're going to fire all the assistant coaches whose contracts are up. Appert's going to be back next year, and Ruff's going to get to pick his staff. It should have happened last summer. There's a reason why it didn't. It's going to happen now. I mean, I don't think people should freak out about it. That's what's going to happen. Ruff's going to pick his own assistant coaches now. You know what? There's a reason why it didn't happen last year. I'm sick of hearing about it. It's very simple, people. That's all it is. The owner didn't want to pay. You know, everybody's ripping on Adams, and I'm ripping on Adams too all the time. And he's been terrible in certain things, you know, but man, can we please rip on him for the right things?
I agree.
This just isn't correct. You know, what is he supposed to do in this case?
I never thought that was a Kevin Adams decision. I always felt like, to your point, that was a Terry Pagula thing.
Absolutely.
Connor, you got Connor?
So in terms of the plan for this offseason, obviously you mentioned bringing in 3 defensemen, potentially another goalie to provide competition, a veteran goalie, ideally. Are there any names from a defensive perspective that you know that will be available, either UFAs, RFAs? We talked about offer sheets last night. We know they never actually happened. But from a defensive perspective, what could this team do this offseason to make a real tangible difference in the area in which they struggled most this year?
Well, it's hard. I mean, free agency is hard for obvious reasons. You know, to me, if I'm building this team, I tell Adams what to do. You do you keep what you're doing in the off season. Think of the off season moves that Adams made. You know, he didn't do great 2 years ago. Look at his past off season. Zucker, McLeod, James Reimer. You know, there's been, you know, and then you look at the deadline moves. You know, 3 straight deadlines, he's gotten a guy who's impacted the next year. Greenway, Bo Byram. Now, Norris didn't impact this year, but Norris, assuming he's healthy, is going to be a probably first-line guy next year that you got at the deadline. When you talk about players need to have good summers and need to evolve in their careers, GMs need to evolve in their careers. And one thing Kevin Adams needs to do is you can say they've drafted pretty well. You can say they've run their off seasons pretty well. Kevin Adams needs to become a better GM during the season. When the team is in trouble, November of 2020, I'll get my years now, November of 2022, when they lost 8 in a row, right? This year, they went 0-10-3. You know, when the team is in trouble during the season, the GM cannot sit on his hands. And if the owner won't let you add money to the payroll, you've got to make a move. Obviously, Kevin Adams should have done a couple call-ups from Rochester during that stretch. Certainly after the Montreal game, send a message to your room. The owner came. The next day, you blow up against the Canadians. Nicholas Aube-Kubel, a veteran player who's won a Stanley Cup, turns the puck over, and they score a goal 19 seconds into the game. Nicholas Aube-Kubel should have been on waivers the next day. Send your messages in the room. And that's what Kevin Adams has not done. His work during the season is much more troublesome to me than a lot of his work in the off seasons. He has to evolve. The next year, that first 5-game losing streak, 4-game losing streak, 5, 6, whatever it comes, he has to do something immediately. They sat this year thinking, we just need to win one. We just need to win one. We'll be all right. As soon as we win one, we'll be all right. And you know what? Think of how it went. When they beat the Islanders to break that streak, that was their one game they needed. They played pretty well for a while after that. Of course, it took them 13 games to get their one. That's where Adams has to evolve. So he's got to react better during the season, because I don't have any question he's going to go get some veteran defensemen in here. I don't have any question he's going to do it. Will they be any good? And this whole thing, look at this guy. You can't run it back with the same roster. You know how sick I am hearing that? People say you can't run it back. People, did they run it back this year? Did they run it back?
No.
Duane, did they run it back this year?
No, they signed guys like Lafferty, Zucker, Kubel, who didn't last the entire year.
They turned over almost half the roster.
Yeah, you can't. You definitely, to his point, not to his point, but what you've talked about, you can't go through a fourth offseason and not find the guy to pair with Owen. You just can't do it. You have to figure it out.
That's a core element of your team, a veteran player to play with Owen Power. You've got to do it. And they haven't done it yet. But this idea they're just going to run it back. They didn't run it back this year.
Yeah.
No.
It's like I'm so sick of hearing that. My head hurts when I hear that.
And I do think they were banking on a similar season from UPL, which, whether that's smart for them to have done, given the relative inconsistency up until that point, I personally was a big believer in him, and he said himself he didn't have the best year. I do think it's at least partially related to, like you said, the defense, the lack of defensive zone coverage and whatnot. One more thing for me, then I got to get out of here to my own hockey game, actually. But what can you speak to on the Dahlin story? I know you've probably mentioned it, but I would like to hear it here about the meeting with Adams, how serious he is or was about making a thinly veiled threat, as it was reported, about something needs to change or he's gone.
It wasn't reported.
So
it wasn't reported. Okay. It wasn't reported.
Got it. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Paul Bissonnette is not a reporter.
Right.
Okay. And it came out that Paul Bissonnette and Elliot Friedman were having a private conversation. And Elliot Friedman has admitted it on his podcast, essentially said, well, I'm probably involved with that. And clearly what happened was Elliot Friedman said, well, Dahlin someday might get impatient about that. And Paul Bissonnette decided to take it. I've got it on good information that Dahlin said he's out of here. He's got, what did he say? He's dunzos.
Yeah,
dunzo,
That's how this blog podcast crap spreads and becomes a story when it's literally non-existent. Because don't you think the captain of every team in the league talks to their GM around the trade deadline about what the team's up to?
No, I definitely.
Everybody does.
I definitely agree with you. Kind of to piggyback off of what Connor asked.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, Duane, but Connor, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, no, and I think
now you asking it. I apologize, but
it's good to hear it.
My button there.
No, it's good to hear it from that perspective, because obviously it's a similar theme to a lot of the things we've discussed in the 30 minutes we've had you on. Like there's smoke and mirrors, there's conspiracy theories, but then there's actual, real, tangible information that you hear as a reporter and being around the team on a daily basis. And I think obviously we as fans do get caught up in what we see online, and then there's a time to actually look at what's really happening in real life. At least from my perspective, like, it was good to hear. In what my opinion, Dahlin's made himself into be a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. He's proven it this year. In that 13-game streak, he didn't play 9 of those games. He's the most important player on this team.
What was their record?
Case they were 0-10-3, correct?
They lost them all.
Yeah, exactly. So he's proven his worth to this team, And now that he's captain, and for him to take some ownership over not building the roster, but having his say in terms of how it's constructed, I think that can only mean good things for this team moving forward. So whatever that conversation actually was, for it to be not deflected, for it to be squashed as quickly as it did, and his reaction to it, I thought that was really productive. And I do think he's going to have a role in how this team looks moving forward. And that can probably only mean good things for this team moving forward.
How many Norris votes would Rasmus Dahlin have this year if the Sabres were a playoff team?
That's probably, I mean, he potentially win, probably, right?
He might win,
He'd be in the top 3 or 4 if they were a playoff team this year.
Sure.
That's how good he's been, how good he looks. But he gets no notice, and he's not going to get any notice because they're not a playoff team. It's the same thing. How many Selke votes would Alex Tuck get this year if they were a playoff team?
I mean,
it's criminal that guy doesn't.
But yeah.
Right.
Mike put Hurls in his place regarding fake news, rumors, hearsay, blogs, clickbait. I think we already covered that, Mauricio. But
of course, so
to piggyback off what Connor said. Me personally, I kind of hope that I think there is the truth, what was said, and something in the middle. And I kind of hope that whatever happened between Rasmus Dahlin and Kevin Adams is somewhere in the middle. Yeah, he doesn't request a trade or demand a trade if things don't change. But I hope that with his leverage, as to Connor's point, being legitimately the most important player, part of this franchise, that he would use that leverage to say, hey, get your heads out of your asses. Let's figure this out, because I don't want to spend my prime years continuing down this playoff drought. I want to get this team there. Please, can we figure this out? And we all know, obviously, Kevin Adams doesn't want to go through Jack Eichel and then having to possibly go through the same thing with Dahlin under different circumstances. But I kind of hope that there is a little bit of truth to that maybe, he's not demanding a trade, but he's starting to put his neck on Kevin Adams' neck, or foot on Kevin Adams' neck a little bit, and be like, figure this out.
Yeah, get some defensemen in here to help us out. We have an offense. Get some defensemen, get some better coaching in here. Make sure the goaltending is shored up. Well, let's figure this out, because right now, it's hard for me to deal with the fact that this is not a playoff team for 2 reasons. One is the offense they have, the number of goals they score, the talent they have, the seasons their top players are having. Okay, Dahlin, Tuck, Zucker, Thompson, all these guys. Okay, the other thing is they've needed someone to step back for a few years to break the drought. And we've all waited for the Boston Bruins to be a team to fall. And what happened? The Boston Bruins finally fell this year. And then all of a sudden, the New York Rangers were the President's Trophy team. They didn't make the playoffs. And the Pittsburgh Penguins stink again. And the Islanders stink finally, and they fall. And and Detroit doesn't make it again. And now they're 8 years. And who makes the playoffs? Ottawa. And what's the score of the Montreal game? Right? I don't even know. I mean,
1-1 last time I checked.
1-1. So Montreal might make the playoffs tonight. And if Montreal doesn't make the playoffs, who's going to make it? Columbus. Yeah. And the Buffalo Sabres are still where the Buffalo Sabres are.
Right in there.
That's just maddening. And you look at the number of games they frittered away and the number of points they frittered away this season. And Ottawa and Montreal, and to a lesser degree Columbus, took the jump that the Buffalo Sabres needed to take when some of these other teams came down.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I have 2 more things that we can let you get out of here. To go even further into free agency, talking defensively, you hear names like Aaron Ekblad, Pionk, Cody Ceci. We talked about Fabro, a guy that they should have claimed off waivers, or maybe they did try and claim him.
Yeah,
maybe
we don't know. They didn't have the claim. Columbus was
know.
Ahead of them at the order at the time.
They might have tried. Yeah. But another name that was brought up by myself and Hurls on our last post game, interesting. I don't think I think it might be less realistic because of how much time he has left in his career than even Marner. Bringing up Marner. John Tavares is a free agent this offseason. How realistic do you think it is, knowing his ties to the city? I mean, he's never won a cup, but do you think it's realistic that a guy like John, maybe instead of spending $15 million on Mitch Marner, you go sign a guy like John Tavares, or even spend a little bit more money on Brock Besser, and then go get your right-handed top 4 defenseman? Does a name like John Tavares pop out to you at all?
I frankly just think John Tavares is re-signing with the Leafs for a lower dollar amount and less term. Especially if the Leafs have a big year in the playoffs. I don't see why John Tavares would the same thing. Why would he want to come to Buffalo? I know there's the connection here with the uncle and that. I just don't see the Sabres as players in that kind of market for that kind of player until they become a winning franchise. I don't think players want to take that risk. I think a guy on defense, Ekblad, I think is going to stay in Florida. I love the idea of Neil Pionk. Why would Neil Pionk come here unless the Sabres do what Seattle did with Brandon Montour and just pay the guy just an exorbitant amount of money in term? How's Brandon Montour enjoying life in Seattle, leaving Florida? Okay, he's got a lot of money in his wallet. I'm sure he's doing fine. But as a hockey move, that made no sense. That was just a money grab.
Yeah.
Maybe the Sabres, I don't see the Sabres as a money grab team throwing that kind of coin and term at a guy. So I don't know what they're going to do, how they're going to. I still think the way it's going to have to be is they're going to have to be a trade, maybe involving someone we have not even considered. But the idea, this free agent, that free agent, nobody's signing here. Nobody's signing as a free agent on a team that is carrying the longest playoff drought in the history of the league by 4 years. Mm-hmm. Guys are not choosing to come into that. They're just not going to do it unless you really overpay, or a guy like Jason Zucker needed to reestablish his value. Give him $5 million. He comes for you. And what happens? A, he plays well, and he's like everybody else who comes to Buffalo. Boy, this place is a lot better than I thought driving down to Kensington on road trips all the time. That's what happens when you get him here. When you get him here, they like it. A lot of them end up living here. Look how much Craig Rivet hated when he found out he was getting traded to Buffalo, and look what Craig Rivet does now. He's lived here 15 years. It happens a lot. But with a 14-year playoff drought, good luck getting any of them to come here.
Yeah, I've tempered my expectations on UFAs. Probably should temper my expectations on RFAs. But what do you think of the possibility of them breaking the norm of not even exploring an offer sheet and actually exploring that option this offseason as a way to bring guys in?
My initial reaction to that is there are no off sheets in this league. And the St. Louis Edmonton thing last summer was just a complete outlier.
Right.
Now, two things might happen to that. Because St. Louis Edmonton happened, more people may look at it. Should we do this? And the other thing is, cap numbers are changing. Cap numbers are going up. Teams are going to have more money to spend. Do they have the draft capital to do it? I don't know. But this could be a summer where it'd be interesting to see if more offer sheets go out. In general, I do not think these general managers, I don't think they want to do it. The hockey general managers are not bold and daring. Tim Murray used to want to always do sign and trades at the draft like the NBA. Nobody would do it. He wanted to do crazy stuff, and he always said nobody would do it. And that's just the way hockey GMs are. They're really conservative. Look at the NBA. Some of the trades they make, throw out Luka Doncic. That's just craziness. Mm-hmm. But you just fired two coaches right before the playoffs. Imagine doing that in hockey. It's happened once. I think the Devils did it late in the season. But for the most part, hockey is a conservative sport that way. I don't think the offer sheet thing is changing at all. These GMs are too much of a club. And Doug Armstrong broke the code. He really broke the code last year with Edmonton. And he did it a little bit. Edmonton was a little bit in transition, but there's only been how many offer sheets that have gone through in the last 12 years? Like three or four? It's almost not done at all.
Yeah. It's just in a situation of desperation, as we've spoken about with Kevin Adams. It does seem like a unique situation where that potentially could be a thing. When if you're not going to get guys to sign here as a UFA, and the trades are pretty uncommon in and of itself.
Why would someone sign an offer sheet to come to Buffalo?
Well, so that's my question, and I would, I guess, like some clarification on that. Like, let's say Kevin offer sheets. Let's say someone just said in the chat, Matthew Nyes. that Matthew Nyes would have to agree to that? Like once it's signed? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he
it's
doesn't
not
want to do it.
It's not a given. Yeah, that they'll sign it.
Right. Okay.
Maybe you sign it in the hopes that your team matches it. You know.
You could do, but you do that, you risk your team doesn't match it, and you end up going to the other side.
I would like to think that this offseason is a desperate one for Kevin Adams. In fact, that this could be his last season as Sabres GM. And if he is trying to perform for another contract, that maybe he would step out of his comfort zone and maybe test the offer sheet market. Only because like you have currently in Rochester 4 former first round picks that aren't guaranteed a spot on this team next year. So it's not like, you have a team that's possibly a front runner to win a Calder Cup this year. Like unless this pick ends up being, I don't even think they can be a top 5 pick right now, can it? Even if they end up finishing second to last.
They're going to be between 6 and 10.
Yeah. So it's not even like, you should be. Again, this pick, this draft wouldn't count towards the offer sheet. I believe it's 2026. It would be the 2026 first round pick. But I mean, you have so much young talent already in the pipeline. Is it really going to kill the future of your franchise when you're already one of the youngest, if not the youngest team in the National Hockey League? To sacrifice some picks to go get a guy that, doesn't have trade protection, can't, whether it's via offer sheet or if it's just trading picks, do what you did with Bowen Byram. He didn't have a choice. He had to come here. Will it work out? I don't know. Will they re-sign? Will they extend him? Will they trade him? Will there be a different return? Will that trade tree kind of continue from Casey Mills? I don't know. But to me, like you they should not be looking at picks as the futures. They should be looking at them now as assets. And I'm sick and tired.
You're right. Adams is going to completely have to change his mentality. I think he will. He knows the draft picks don't matter. I don't care at all who they pick this year between 6 and 10 because they better trade the damn pick. Yeah. Or if they make the pick, then you're trading. If you make the pick, then that tells me, well, they're trading Hellenius or they're trading Ostland or somebody like that who they've drafted. But yeah, the only way you're keeping the pick is if you ended up at 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's not going to go. I just think at this point they have enough of those picks. They have enough young players. They can't be waiting on a guy for 3 years. This is not the NFL. You can't draft yourself out of trouble and draft 5 starters. And I have to remind people of that on Twitter way more than I should. The number of years we focused on the draft around here, people kind of should be familiar with the rules. But to me, it's just a case of this is about changing the mindset of the Buffalo Sabres. Has always been about drafting and development, 10 years of it. It cannot be about drafting and development this year because if it keeps about drafting and development, Kevin Adams is going to be out of a job. Half of his staff is going to be out of a job, maybe more than half his staff if the new guy comes in and sweeps everybody out. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs here unless they realize it isn't about drafting and development this year. It's about developing your NHL roster right now, not next year, not 2 years from now. It's always been, I got in this argument every year at press conferences at Botterill. When is it going to be about this year? And he used to get really annoyed with me. I said, when is it going to be about this year? And really, I've never had that argument much with Adams because Adams has always had a lot of runway. He's always been building and building and building and building, and it's never really felt about this year with Adams. Well, it felt like this year was supposed to be, and it kind of was. Well, next year it is. Next season is next year. It's the next year I always asked Jason Botterill about that I never got, and I've always wondered when it's going to be for Kevin Adams. The Buffalo Sabres are finally about the season they're on.
Yeah.
And we spent 10 years looking ahead. They're not looking ahead anymore.
So, Hurls, I know you got to get out of here to get to your game. One of my last points, too. Again, you can if you got to go, you got to go. One of my last things, and he's been kind of almost spamming our chat here, calling Devin Levi a bust. He's not the answer. He's this, he's that. I don't understand why Mauricio here thinks that Devin Levi is the part of the problem when he's been the best goalie in the AHL by and far. Your thoughts on Devin Levi? I mean, I don't need him to be the starter next year, and he shouldn't be the starter next year. But me and you have talked about it too with UPL. Is there a realistic chance that they bail on him after just 1 year of this contract and maybe go towards a veteran goaltender and maybe bringing Devin Levi up to be the backup in his third year of pro?
It's possible, but it's an incomplete picture. I want to see how things go with Rochester in the playoffs.
Agreed.
To me, a deep run in the playoffs versus a first-round knockout says a lot about what Devin Levi's future is going to be with this organization. I think Devin Levi is going to be back next year. I think he's going to be in Rochester.
Yeah.
I think that my guess is they're going to go with UPL and someone else they acquire.
I could totally see that. Yep.
Levi, it's problematic this year. Levi went 2-7. You know what Levi's record, and they put Levi in bad spots, and they shouldn't have, but Lindy didn't trust Reimer early enough, quick enough. Levi went 0-5 on the road this year with a 4.63 goals against and an 867 save percentage.
Yeah.
You just can't have that.
You can't.
They didn't develop enough trust in Reimer early enough. And Reimer and Levi together went 4-13-1 on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So the goaltending numbers weren't great on the road. That's one of the reasons of the road problem. Levi was put in bad spots. Rochester is a place this year where he could develop, where he could be put in a good situation, and it's worked that way. Let's see how he does in the playoffs under some pressure. And remember, they're not favored if they see Laval. Laval's going to win that division. I want to see some success from the Amherst in those first couple rounds. I want to see Levi play well. That's going to impact the decision, if I'm the GM, what I do with my goaltending going forward. But am I ready to give up on Levi? No. Am I ready to give up on Luukkonen? No. I'm going to need some other team to make me an offer. I mean, if they get involved with Demko, one of them's probably going back to Vancouver. But it's a tough spot. It would have been a lot easier if Luukkonen had just had a decent year this year, not the real roller coaster ride we saw. Because now they don't really know what they have, except they got a guy on a long-term deal. They need to play well, and if he doesn't play well, it's a big problem.
I was never happy with the length of that deal either. I thought given only – and this even goes back to his time in Rochester. He's only had one good year in the pro level. Like in Rochester, he never had a 900 or above save percentage, always over a three goals against. Granted, that was a product of the teams he was on. I just think we had Ole Kolzig with us last week, who I was kind of surprised. I know he had the 1 year in Rochester, in the AHL before he finally got signed and, by Washington. But he was pretty familiar with Devin and said that he is, in his opinion, that is the guy that's going to be the franchise goalie for this team in the future. And I've always felt, and again, to a guy in the chat here who thinks he's a head case, the only reason, Florida even dealt him is because they had Spencer Knight and Bobrovsky.
Right.
What are you going to do with him? You spent, and Alex Lyons, who had a pretty good year that year as a backup.
And what's your investment? Your investment, Spencer Knight was a first-round pick. Devin Levi's a seventh-round pick.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a matter of investment. But, you look at the numbers, you have to look at guys. What was Luukkonen's save percentage this year on the road? Okay, his save percentage on the road was .887. What's Luukkonen's save percentage this year at home? .886.
Yeah, not good.
He kind of is what he is this year.
Yeah.
That's what he is. So you have to figure out if he's the guy. You're paying him like he's the guy. He played most of the games. You overplayed him early in the year. Can Levi become the guy? Levi is on the Dustin Wolf track. Mm-hmm. He's physically kind of the same. He's playing the same. Not he's still only played about 70 games in the AHL, but it's taken a long time for Dustin Wolf to become the guy in Calgary.
Yeah,
he's still a rookie. Goalies are like that, man. Goalies don't show up when they're 18 or 19. And that's the time you can give up on them too early.
People forget Ryan Miller didn't make his, have his first full NHL season until he was like 25 years old. He wasn't.
They would have been forced an interesting decision with Ryan Miller had the canceled season happened.
Yeah.
Would he have been in Buffalo or would he have been in Rochester? it never happened. So he was able to gain that experience and come to Buffalo in 2005-06 and take the job from Marty Baron. But Ryan Miller played over 100 games in Rochester. So it's hard to give up on guys when they're goaltenders, especially because that's a hard position to learn. And, I keep looking at Dustin Wolf and looking what he's doing now, thinking, boy, that's awfully familiar to me that this could be the Devin Levi track, and you don't want to jump off that train too soon. I still think goalies got to make saves. They got to bail their teams out. Yep. They got to cover up for mistakes. But, man, they got to be better defensively. They got to have defensemen in here who are better, who are experienced, who can get this team out of trouble and not leave everything to the goalie all the time. We got to stop the dessert buffets with the turnovers. We got to stop Samuelsson doing what he's doing. I mean, Samuelsson, frankly, has been better the last few games, but the turnovers are still bad. The awareness is tough in front of the net. We just need we need to see solid defense play on this club, and we haven't seen it for so long once Dahlin's not on the ice. And frankly, for the amount of garbage Power's taken, some of it's deserved. Boy, they haven't looked all that great back there these last couple games without Power out there, just for the record. That's another whole story. I think we're going to get more from Adams. It doesn't sound like Power's going to miss training camp or not be ready for the season, but it might impact this summer, this injury. So that's problematic. But, they need at least 2 and probably 3 new veteran defensemen in here for next season.
I'm assuming you got one more thought, Hurls?
Yeah, you talk a lot about Kevin Adams changing his mentality, which will be a big factor in next season. Let's say he does, and next season doesn't go well, and they miss the playoffs. Kevin Adams gets fired. Half of his staff gets fired. Do you think Terry Pegula will, after 15 years, change his mentality and allow a guy to come in and take over and have his not full 100% influence, because obviously Terry's still the owner, but do you think he'll finally change his mentality if the drought reaches 15 years?
No, I think he will not change the model of the organization. The mentality change will be that I cannot see Terry Pegula hiring another first-time GM.
Got it. It's a step in the right direction.
You are going to have to hire a former NHL GM or a former NHL, at least assistant GM for this position. You cannot hire another rookie. And all due respect to Botterill was the top prospect for any GM in the league at the time the Sabres hired him. Mm-hmm. And he was a former Sabre, so you can't say it was a bad hire. It just didn't work. Adams was the guy in the office next door who was the business guy. Okay. Murray was crazy scout guy who had lineage in the league. Didn't work. You've got to hire an experienced NHL GM in the way if Kevin Adams is out of here. It has to be that change of mentality. I don't think Pegula is going to go full bore. President of hockey, new model. No, but you cannot hire another first-time GM. This cannot be an on-the-job training position anymore with that kind of playoff drought.
I agree. I know, Connor, I know you got to get out of here, so if you got to go, you can.
Thanks for joining us.
One of my last thoughts here, and it was something that was brought up in the chat, is a Matthias Samuelsson buyout a real possibility, considering what – I mean, they'd be paying – I forget what the exact number is against the cap and how many years it would be, but it wouldn't be anything that would detrimentally affect them being able to sign players.
No. You know why? It would be cheaper than normal because he's under 25. Okay. Even at that, I'd have to look up the numbers, but he'd be on the cap for 10 years.
Yeah.
Do you want Matthias Samuelsson on your cap for 10 years in any way, shape, or form? No.
Probably not, no. Well,
no, I think Matthias
if it was a different franchise, I might think otherwise. They might be willing to do it, but given the history of this ownership, I don't know.
I think Matthias Samuelsson has trade value. You might retain some of the salary, but the other thing, Duane, keep in mind, anytime you talk to the Sabres about a trade and you're thinking to yourself, boy, I hope they get rid of this guy. Well, that other team is thinking, Buffalo has just screwed this guy up. We'll fix him. The reputation here is all the players come out of Buffalo screwed up, and I think other teams are thinking that Samuelson got screwed up here. The Sabres might be able to, they could retain some if they want, but it's not that expensive a deal. It's only what, $4.2 million a year?
Mm-hmm.
It's not terrible.
No.
I think if the Sabres want to move Samuelson, I think there's a market for him. I think they can move him.
I think it'd be better if he was a right-handed shot defenseman. I think the market would be a little bit
Would
bigger.
be.
Those, but with him being a left-handed shot, it makes it a little tougher. I think the injuries have played a huge part in his downfall, no doubt about it. Because remember that year and a half he had with Duane to start his NHL career. I mean, that was considered one of the best pairings in the league.
But see, that's the other issue is you've got to be durable.
Yeah, you got to be available.
If you're not durable, you're not valuable.
Yep. Locker room clean out this weekend, and then we'll get out of here. Obviously, we've had some polarizing comments in the past on that day. Yeah, to say the least. That's putting it lightly, I think.
Duane, have you lost your love for the game with this season?
Yeah, it's definitely been going to be a day, I think, more so not this year than years past. To hear the players' thoughts, especially a guy like Alex Tuck, who has bled blue and gold, red and black, goat head, whatever you want to say it, his entire life. I think in terms of, was it July 1st, he should be a priority for this team, getting that guy under contract long-term, have him finish out his career as a Sabre, and make him known that this is how much we value you as being a part of the solution of this team. But I'm very interested to hear the thoughts on guys like him. We've already heard from Darlene, but I'd like to hear more from him, given, obviously we haven't really heard about his thoughts. I mean, to the extent since he reacted to the Elliot Friedman and Paul Bissonnette thing.
Of course, I mean, we did hear from him. Lance Lasowski talked to him on the road trip. It's just that
you're right. You're correct. You are right.
He hasn't been seen in Buffalo on the TV cameras in front of the microphone, so people haven't seen or heard from him.
Oh yeah. Do you now? I know what the answer to this is, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We'll hear from Lindy, obviously. We'll hear from Kevin, obviously. Is there a chance that we get some type of statement, maybe not in front of a camera, some type of statement from Terry Pegula? Obviously, we always get that end of letter. I know the Bruins put one out this year, having obviously, them not making the playoffs for the first time in I don't know how many years. But do you expect something even beyond that letter to season ticket holders and the fans, some type of answer to a lot of the questions that I'm sure he knows he's going to be getting?
No, I think there might be another letter. There was a letter last year. There's been letters before. I mean, Terry hasn't spoken to the media since the day he fired Botterill and hired Adams. So that's 2020. I don't expect the media is going to get the chance to talk to Terry. I don't think Terry wants to do any interviews about the Sabres.
Not since that day. I remember that day very vividly.
Yeah, so we're not going to hear from Terry, which is unfortunate because we should. But we'll see. The players are talking Friday and Saturday. Adams and Lindy are talking late Saturday afternoon. We'll see what kind of management statement. Maybe Pete Coelho gives a statement, but he's already talked a little, that they're not happy. They understand, but, there are specific questions here that could be asked and directed only to Terry Pegula about some of the things that have happened in the past, and some of the things in the very recent past. The subject of the internal cap comes up. I think it's been a little overplayed, but now it becomes more of an issue because the excuse you had for it, which was legitimate, is no longer legitimate. So there's no reason for it now, and the cap is going up anyway. To me, it's just the accountability factor. You're the owner. You've got the longest playoff drought in the history of the league. It'd be nice to hear your thoughts on how you could change this. It'd be nice to hear your thoughts on your management structure and your management spending. People spend too much time on player payroll. This organization is tight and cheap on management structure and scouting staff and experience of NHL pro scouting people. That's where it's cheap on. It's not really that much cheap on player payroll. These are the kind of questions you'd ask them. You ask them about the condition of the arena. You'd ask Terry about the lease and negotiations. And there's plenty of questions to ask him I don't anticipate we're ever going to get the chance. I don't think he's talking I don't think he would talk about the Sabres till that football stadium's open. So it's paid for, completed, construction's over. I just don't think that's just not his jam. He's not talking to us. He's not obligated to talk to us for the record. For the record, the coach is required to talk to us. The GM is required to talk to us at the end of the season. The owner's not. It happens in some markets. It doesn't happen in others. It doesn't happen in this one. It's not like I haven't tried to make it happen.
Oh, trust me. I believe that you have.
But it's not going to happen. And, I haven't asked in a while on that point because it's not going to happen. I know sometimes I don't want to ask a question I know the answer to. It's not going to happen. He's not talking to us. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how Kevin Adams handles it. Do I expect any bombshells? I don't expect any disconnect like Jack told us there was a disconnect. I don't expect anyone saying they lost their love for the game. We've had some interesting moments here, but, I think we know who's coming back. I think we know who might not be coming back, who really is on the outs. It's up to Kevin Adams to rebuild, retool this roster, get the holes filled for next year so they can make a legitimate run. Jack
Quinn, last thought, Jack Quinn's future with this team. Do you think he's still here next year, or do you think they might try and sell on him given the end of that stretch of games like we saw last year?
I think they'll try to sell on him, not in any way, shape, or form. They don't like him. I think they know the injuries impacted him. We've seen a lot of improvement in his play at the end of the season.
100%.
I think he's healthier. I think he is the most tradable commodity you have right now to help you acquire help on defense. And if they trade Jack Quinn, it's not because they don't like Jack Quinn at all. It's because Jack Quinn or JJ Peterka are the piece they can use to get that help on defense.
I agree. As always, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure having you. If you want to find Mike, you can find him at by M Harrington. Is it by M Harrington on Twitter?
By M Harrington, and we have our own podcast at BuffaloNews.com, the Ice Time podcast with Lance Lysowski, and BuffaloNews.com is always updated to the moment. And right after the game ends, there's usually a quick story up on the game. There's only one game left, but always the latest news there. And the Adams press conference, for example, is going to be too late for the Sunday paper. Well, we're going to have stories and info and commentary on it on the web Saturday night. So, that's what the website is for. And that's kind of the new wave of the world here that we're navigating in 2025 with the change in print publication. But it doesn't mean if it's not in the paper the next morning, it's still on the web available. And, you'll get all your analysis as well. So it should be an interesting couple days. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely worth subscribing to the Buffalo News online. I myself do. And I will be tuning in for both those days. Currently, I'm on the mend with a broken leg, so I'm out of work right now. I broke my leg at work, so I have nothing but time. So there's no doubt on Friday and Saturday, I'll absolutely be tuning in and hearing your guys' thoughts. But again, thank you, Mike. A lot of information, given to hear in our viewers, so I couldn't appreciate it more.
All right, Duane. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This has been episode 185, Two Goalies, One Mike, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room, with over 300 beers to choose from. Make sure you make it a Fatty Beer and tell them Two Goalies, One Mike sent you. I am Duane for Connor Hurley and one of our favorite guests, Mike Harrington. We will talk to you next time. And as always, go Sabres. Talk to you later.